everyone. Thanks for tuning in. This is the Tom Golly official podcast, and I'm so excited for today's guest. Today's guest joining me via Zoom is the wonderful and incredible singer-songwriter, Christian artist, the one and only Jason Gray.
I'm like, oh, shoot. I need to be wonderful and incredible now. I hope I can pull that off.
I like to set the bar high. But you had mentioned before we went on the air that you had done a bunch of Zoom concerts tonight. Tell me about those.
I did a pre-recorded live stream where I played through all the songs off of my first record, All the Lovely Losers, and we sold passes to it. If you wanted to watch it, you could just buy a pass, or buy a pass and a t-shirt, or buy a pass and this exclusive poster, or you could buy a pass and a private Zoom concert for 25 minutes. And so I was just doing those, and they're so sweet. There was one of them is a lady in Australia who I never make it out there, so I would probably never have an opportunity, to cross paths with her. But that opportunity is just really, really sweet. And so yeah, it was good.
Well, has anybody ever asked you to play one of your older songs and you just cannot remember?
Oh yeah, all the time. So I like to a lot of the time I like to ask an audience, what would you like to hear this evening? And I take requests. Now it's a little bit of a cheat because they will usually ask for the songs that they heard on the radio, which are the songs that I play all the time,
Mm-hmm.
But every once in a while it'll be a crowd with like true fans, like true longtime fans who've been with me from the beginning and even have my earlier independent records, and they'll ask for play Curiosity Killed the Cat. I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't played that in 20 years. What are you doing to me right now? And then I have to be like, oh, thank you so much for knowing the old songs. That means like you're like a true fan. Thank you so much for asking for that. But no, sorry.
How long have you been releasing music?
And we usually make a joke out of it and stuff. I released my first record in 1997.
Okay, so you've been at this a minute.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Wow,
24 years.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it sure is. Now, what is it that you would say was it was the hardest thing early in your career, and maybe still is?
Well, it's always hard to get enough people paying attention that you can make a living doing it. That's the hardest part. And it's weird too. You just have to be really careful to not become resentful and okay. I think that's it. I think the hardest part is maintaining a purity of heart that doesn't get twisted by resentment or bitterness,
Mm-hmm.
Just in terms of, okay, like an example, I've never won a Dove Award. I don't need a Dove Award. I don't need that validation. But I hear a lot of people describe me as one of the best songwriters in our genre, and but then I'm not nominated for a Dove Award, and then I see who does win the Dove Award for Songwriter of the Year, and I've written with that person before, and I'm like, they're not writing, they're saying, oh yeah, I like that line that you said, and I don't like that line that you said. They're more acting as an editor.
Sure.
And I can get bitter and jaded about that, and I can be tempted to think that, no, I deserve that. But then, it only takes a minute to realize, okay, yeah, but if I got it, there'd be 1,000 other songwriters who are better than me who'd say I should have had it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And, so I think, keeping my heart in the right place, and also too, I remember I was honoring, I was presenting an ASCAP award to Jason Ingram, who's a songwriter who's written many songs that everybody would know, and he was being honored, and they asked me to present, and I've written with him, and I said there are two ways to have a hit song. At least two of the ways are: you can know your audience so well that you know how to say the things that will press their buttons and get them to respond and get them to care about your song and buy the record. You can do that, and that's a form of manipulation. Or you can know your audience so well that you know how to speak their language, you know how to speak to their heart because you know them so well. And that's what I believe my friend Jason Ingram does. So one of the challenges is always not, like, you can see the control panel in front of you, and you can have a sense like, oh, if I say this, if I pull this lever, it's gonna make it happen, and it's
Sure.
it's gonna. And how do you write a song or do a concert? This same thing happens when I stand before an audience. I see the control panel in front of me. If I say something about America, or I say something patriotic or something religious or something like that, I'm gonna have them. And how do you stand there with the control panel in front of you and not use it, and be led by the Spirit instead? So that's always been the challenge for me. It's not so challenging anymore because I think I've made it a habit to never use the control panel. I don't think I do that.
That's something that I have struggled with. It's like, hey, I know that if we do this one cool thing during this song, it's going to have them. But now, depends on the situation. I mean, if it's worship, if it's Sunday morning, it's hard to go, hey, I could totally use that control panel, as you put it, but you have to really step back. Whereas what I've enjoyed about doing the CCM thing is that, like, I kind of take the Bart Millard approach, which he talked about one time, how what he does, they don't consider it worship. What Mercy Me does, they consider it an hour and a half of entertainment with the gospel in it. And in that case, it's a different approach. It's a different thing. And I've sort of subscribed to that, but yet still tried to find the balance of making sure that, you don't make it about you.
Yeah.
But I will say that, where you talked about being bitter about the Dove Awards and things like that, I have found as an indie artist really just trying to scratch the surface or just try to get someone's attention to go, hey, I'm doing some things here, like, someone give me a hand.
Yeah.
Because I feel like this is an industry that if somebody doesn't speak for you, somebody doesn't open a door for you, you're not kicking it open. You can't buy your way into it. It's just, so my bitterness has been when I see certain people, it's like, man, what has that person done? They've done nothing. They're not even touring. They've never even released a song, and they're on tour with him. They're on a tour bus for 3 months on that tour. What am I doing wrong? What else do I have to do? And so I think for me, that's been a struggle. I mean, have you ever hit a spot like that in your career where you're just like, man, this isn't fair, and just thought about doing something else?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, constantly, and it's one of those things too, like the cliche of the person who works for wealth or to climb the corporate ladder only to find that everything, they're still lonely and sad. Like it didn't solve the problem, as an outsider of the industry, I did this for years independently and believed that the record deal and the song on the radio and that then that'll change things, and it's and it did. I don't want to pretend that I haven't been blessed and that it hasn't changed things, but you still feel a lot of what you were describing, and just trying to, but yeah, like I'm in a little bit of a season of that right now where there's that verse, do not grow weary in well doing. Well, why would that verse be in there? Well, it's because what happens when you are in the middle of well doing? You're going to get weary, which is interesting because our assumption is that no, if you're doing well, if you're doing God's will, you're going to be empowered. You're going to, but no, it's right there. Well doing causes weariness, and so that verse had to be in there. Do not grow weary in well doing. So
I think that's the one thing that I always think is strange is, we talk about like following the will of God, doing what God has called you to do. And I think like, at least for me, I often look at like, hey, if I'm supposed to wear these shoes, they're going to fit and they're going to be comfortable. They're going to look good, feel good, all that. But I find in this walk, in this journey, following God's will feels like wearing the wrong shoes all the time. And it's like, hey, I just want to take these off and put shoes on that fit, God. And it's like, no, those are the shoes. And it doesn't make sense. Yeah. And I think that's a struggle at times where the big question ends up being, well, why? Now, I know that you know this, you've talked about this extensively, how a lot of times you don't really see what God was doing until you get on the other side of it. And you're like, oh, okay, I had to go through that to get here, or I had to go through this to become this.
Yeah.
So a lot of times that does make sense. But and you just mentioned how you're kind of in the season you're at now. What I notice most artists, because I got really, really sad earlier this year, and I'm still kind of trying to navigate through this, but I just had this moment of like, do I even want to do this anymore? Because COVID just shut everything down. It just totally just brought everything to a halt. And I think what, most people did like I did, and they kind of filled that void with other things as best they could.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, time to get back to it. And I find that most artists are struggling with like, can I do this again? And I don't know if that's more because we all kind of had the rug pulled out from under us, and that could very well happen again. And for me, I wonder is like, do you think that that's just the normal human condition when something you're passionate about becomes something you just absolutely can't do, and that it's hard to get started again? Or do you think that there is something spiritual going on trying to stop us from just being used by God to do what we've been doing for so long?
Gosh, what a good question. Maybe like anything else, I imagine there are like 20 layers to it,
Oh, sure.
I don't know if it's any one thing. Maybe a loss of momentum could be one of them. For me, a part of it is I'm wrestling with this, and I don't have anyone who's listening to this. I'm going to ask for your grace because I don't have perfect language for all of it yet. So my language may come off as self-righteous. Maybe some of it is, and whatever. My language isn't going to be perfect about all this, so I'm working it out. But I do feel like a little bit of weariness with the I'll call it the evangelical Christian experience and experiment. The way of doing church, the way of doing Christianity that I came up in, feels very limited and limiting to me now. Like I'm aware. My sense is that it's a hostile environment for the conversations that I most want to have and that seem the most real. Maybe that's not true of the church. Maybe that's my own fear. You know what I mean? Like, I think about this all the time about people who leave the church and they're angry with the church because the church, all they did was shame me. And I get that feeling. I thought that at one time in my life, but then as I grew up a little bit more, I realized, oh, actually, you know what? The shame was already in me. And the shame that was in me caused me to tune into certain words and messages that I heard from the pulpit.
Sure.
And I'm not entirely sure that I can lay it all on the church's doorstep, that the church shamed me, you know. Actually, I think I had shame in me, and that caused me to hear things through a certain filter. So I'm at least part of what happened there. You know what I mean?
Well, sure.
So anyway, I recognize all that, you know, but there is a sense of well, before we started recording, I joked with you about like what kind of stuff are we going to talk about? Are we gonna cuss and all that kind of stuff? You know, like I was making a joke, and
I mean, we can.
Conversation was, well, maybe that's not in everybody's best interest, you know, because
right,
we have careers to think of and all that kind of stuff, and completely reasonable statement, but there's that sense of being filtered. Actually, you said, man, I'm not gonna have you play a song. May I play you a song anyway?
If Dave, that's what you want to do.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
May I play you a new song?
Okay.
A brand new song. It's pretty short, but I think it'll say all this better than I'm saying it right now.
Yeah. Rock and roll.
It's hard to tell the truth when I'm in church. Sometimes it's just more trouble than it's worth. So I'll keep my loaded questions closer to the vest, imagining their faces when I'm standing there undressed. 'Cause it's hard to tell the truth when I'm in church. And it's hard to tell the truth when I'm in pain. Afraid you think I'm weak and run away. We line up to kiss the winners while we send the losers home. So I'll smile and say that I'm okay before I risk being alone. 'Cause it's hard to tell the truth when I'm in pain. Oh, yes, it's hard. It's hard to tell the truth. And it's hard to tell the truth to myself. When I'm the perfect demographic for the lies I want to sell. In the mirror there's a devil and an angel I can see. And they'll both lead me to ruin. Oh, the truth that sets me free. But it's hard to tell the truth to myself.
Wow.
So that's
That
part of what I'm talking about, is that sense that it's hard to say what I really feel, what's really going on in the church setting. And I wrote it
wow.
down the way I did, hoping that that'll resonate at the beginning of like, yeah, the church, boo, But to tap into that kind of self-righteous anger that we have towards the church that brought us up and took such good care of us, and helped us in so many ways.
Talk about taking like stuff that I'm working through and putting it into a song. Like I've really been working through my issues with church and what church is and it's more than just what I think it should be, but I think there's just more of what just looking at like, well, what are we doing? What are we doing with the gospel? What are we doing in these buildings? I have yet to find a church in Nashville I feel like I belong in. Then I see things like a friend of mine recently, he went through a divorce. He chose to get divorced. He was only married a couple of months. And it was a weird situation because he wanted to end the relationship prior to the marriage because he just didn't feel like it was a right fit. He got pressured and guilt tripped into following through with it. And very quickly he found himself in a very abusive relationship. And when he just knew this wasn't the right thing at all, wanted to get out of it. Well, the pastors wouldn't leave him alone, basically insisting they meet with him, insisting that he not get divorced. And he just knew this is what he needs to do.
Yeah.
And when he made the decision, finally, he's now divorced. He was informed very recently that he's no longer welcome at that church or any of its campuses because he refused, spiritual. He refused counseling and to adhere to the spiritual authority of the pastors. Yeah. And I can't think of a moment in the Bible where anyone was told they weren't welcome in the church. And it really just when I see things like that, it's like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
What are we doing as a church? And then I look at me as an artist going, well, part of what I do is try to make music that makes guys like me, who 12 years ago wouldn't have been caught dead in a church, go, hey guys, the church is a safe place. It's the place where you're going to find, meaning and purpose in God. And you're going to find people who are going to support you and walk through, because that's what I found initially. But I don't feel like that's anywhere. It's like, well, how do I continue trying to point people to Jesus and go, but these local churches, these men and women that serve, they're your people. And I don't know that I could support that anymore with what I've seen. I've seen more issues like what my friend went through. And then even just some seasons like I went through where I'm just like, what happened? What's happened over the last 10 years or for at least in my experience, where church went from a place that felt safe and the presence of God did amazing things in, to where now people are being told they're not welcome. They're being told that they have to do the pastor's will, what the pastor thinks they should do with their lives, or not come. It's a strange place to be, and it's a strange place to feel like. I feel like a lot of what we do is invite people, to get to know God, maybe give them hope, point them in the direction of this thing that, at least for me, has caused me a lot of hurt and a lot of pain, and people I love a lot of hurt and a lot of pain.
Yeah.
When it used to provide them with just something totally opposite of that.
It's tricky. I know there is precedent in the epistles of excommunicating people who are persistent in their rebellion. That's in the epistles, and at the same time, I don't see the spirit of that in Jesus's ministry.
Right.
And so there is this rub. I'm beginning to do some research on the difference between the gospel of Jesus and the gospel of Paul. It's a great thing to consider, but like I've also been going through a phase like I've always been I did not think through this to talk about it, but I'm going to do my best to articulate it. But like,
that's fine.
Something like, for years I've heard and I've said, once the church had the grace awakening, which is beautiful and needed, we could still use more of it probably, but there was a sense of the church is a safe place. The love of God is a safe place. Acceptance, everyone to come in, and I agree with that. I've been curious lately about the value of judgment. No one wants to be judgmental. I don't want to be judgmental.
Right.
But because I've been thinking a lot about the role. Well, I've been thinking about masculinity and masculine archetypes and what does it mean to be a man? What is a man's role? What's a father's role specifically? And have come down to the fact that, well, I think a part of a dad's role is to be the judge, because we need a judge, And in Christianity, we do kind of have this. We kind of have it built in because we have Jesus, who's love, and everyone come. He's accepting, but standing behind him is the God of the Old Testament.
Right.
So, like, we still do get a little bit of the benefit of having the judge, meaning I think we need a judge. Okay, I'm speaking kind of ambiguously, but I'll say this. I know parents. I know of parents who are compassion and empathy and gentle and accepting and loving, so loving. And they're great, but maybe their kids are not quite as in line as they could be, I have another friend who's a dad. He's pretty hardcore.
Yeah.
And the law and his kids respect him, but there's not a lot of intimacy between him and his kids, and there's always kind of like a little bit of angst, and he is the judge, and all of his kids are like the best human beings I've ever met.
Yeah.
And so, like, I've been thinking about that. Like here's what I've been wondering. Like, is it difficult for him to be the judge because he's the bad guy? But is that like a kind of self-sacrifice? Yeah. Because it has served his kids well, and but I think he's paid a price for that. So like, all those things are on my mind. All that to say, the way that I would lean is I don't know that I would excommunicate that.
Yeah, I agree.
That man. That wouldn't be my style. But with these ideas that I'm working through, is there maybe some kind of a benefit of going through that experience?
Sure.
You know what I mean?
And I think so. And I think, and I think that the challenge is,
like,
and
this is some obvious benefit either of like, like, well, yes, it's gonna teach him that if you do the wrong thing, you're out. I don't mean that, but is there some kind of benefit to experiencing that fall from grace so that he can find new grace in the next place, or who knows?
Sure.
I couldn't.
Well, What
that.
what I struggled with a lot was literally, this is a person who was, I mean, he literally, like, I've known him for years, and he's probably the only person I would leave my social security number, my bank cards, all my cash, keys to my safe with. He's that guy, just a man of integrity, honesty, and he's just literally, like I joke around, I call him Captain America, because he's literally just the most true blue guy I've ever known. And just, when he, honestly, I knew that when he got married, I'm like, because he called me. I've never seen this man cry a day ever. He's just not that guy. And he called me on FaceTime one night crying, and he's just like, "Yeah, things aren't going well, man. I don't know what to do." And we talked through it. I told him, "Man, I think you need to get out of this relationship, or at least take a break from it instead of getting married." Well, I don't know exactly. Now, I know later he was essentially guilt tripped and manipulated into getting married. And again, I don't want to share all the details, but ultimately I will say this: he was in a very toxic, very, very narcissistic situation, where pretty much he would get told, like, well, if you get divorced, you're going to hell. And that was very manipulative. That was very, and to me, he just made a mistake going into something that I can tell you, if you knew everything there was to know going into it, you might argue it was never the will of God for this union to take place. So I have a hard time saying, hey, we worship a God that says, well, that wasn't my will, but because it's marriage and you agreed to it, sorry. I just don't think we serve a God that's that way.
Well,
I just don't.
Before you get to that statement, there's a bunch of other statements that are iffy.
Sure.
Like there's a lot of shaky ground, on the way to there, even, I mean, like at some point, well, just, and I don't know him or the,
sure.
I'm speaking
right.
But I mean, all that to say, there have been unfair things that have happened to me, or things that I perceived as unfair anyway.
Yeah.
According to me. And I got the raw deal, I think, on a few things. But I remember a friend of mine said something once. He said, "Man, I hate what you're going through right now, but I wonder how things would feel differently in you if you could receive everything as from the hands of the Lord." Now, theologically, I don't know how to apply that to everything. I don't know how to apply that to rape, genocide, or any of those things. But there was something about changing that posture to, like, okay, and maybe saying receive everything from the hands of the Lord is vulnerable to misunderstanding because of how religious that language is. Let me put it this way. I've been thinking a lot about the rule of yes and. Have you heard that before? So,
yeah.
So like, if you ever watched Whose Line Is It Anyway, or any kind of improv comedy, the way it works is, like, if you and I are doing improv comedy, you come up with a scenario, So the other day I was walking to the supermarket and I ran into a gorilla. And then you look at me, you throw it to me, and I have to build on that, In order for that to work, I have to say yes to what you offered me.
Right.
And I have to build on it. And if I say, no, I'm not going to do the gorilla thing, it stops the momentum.
Right.
Or if I say yes, but I'm going to tweak it a little bit, which is like what they did with the third new Star Wars movie, like, because, well, the fans weren't so crazy about the number 2 movie, so we'll keep going, but we're going to switch everything, Anyway, yes, but causes its own problems. But yes and keeps the story moving, right?
That's
And
interesting.
I
Yeah.
think about that as like, oh, that's a great spiritual discipline to accept what comes my way that can't be changed. I can't change it. So all I can do is accept it and build on it, and that's just a fruitful way of living that saves me from resentment and bitterness,
Right.
and keeps my eye open. It keeps me tuned to possibility too.
Which I guess that's what we need to have, because, like I said, I mean, all of this is basically circled around where things I've seen happen in church to make us go, "What's going on? Like,
Yeah.
why are we doing this?" And somebody has said once to me, said, Christians are the only ones in the world who shoot their own wounded.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, what a topic, But and a little quick segue. You said something earlier about according to me. That might be a song right there.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad that came back around to okay, just to kind of wrap all that up with just a little bit of clarity. I'm so hesitant to speak into this at all because you're speaking of a real story, and I'm kind of being curious about it as like in a speculative way.
Yeah.
But so like I don't mean this for that person, and what they've gone through I'm sure is awful. So like I don't have any opinions about that. I'm just kind of being curious in my own mind about things that I've gone through.
Oh yeah.
I'm at a place where it's better for me to use the language of accept everything as those from the hands of the Lord, or yes and, than to walk away wounded and carry that woundedness with me too long, I'm much healthier and happier. And you know how I learned how to get there? By being wounded so many times.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's how I learned how to navigate all that. So
would you say you have to embrace that? You have to embrace it, or almost like welcome. I don't know. Welcome maybe isn't the right word, but like you have to embrace those seasons and try to see the purpose in being wounded.
Yeah, the yes and thing, and the purpose thing can be tricky too, because I think we can be, if we're not careful, our mind can start working like, oh, everything happens for a reason, and this happened because of this.
Well, sure.
Maybe, but like, we don't know that, or at least I feel like I don't know that. And I'm going to stay as much out of the realm of speculation as I can. What I do know is that this thing I did go through, whether it was God's will or not, or whatever, by God's grace, it did produce this thing in me that I'm grateful for now. I don't know if I was meant to go through it or supposed to, or that was the purpose of it. But it, it's like I say, like I heard a song called "Nothing Is Wasted," and I wrote that song because I don't have the faith to say everything happens for a reason. I don't have that faith.
Right. Sure.
Maybe that's true, but I'm not there. I don't know how to believe that. However, what I can say with confidence is that no matter what happens, anything that happens, it's not beyond God's redemptive reach to do good with it and to make sense.
See, I've been trying to take so one thing I struggle with, and I've never really shared this with anybody publicly, but like I know that I struggle with a lot of I don't want to call it unforgiveness, because I've tried the forgiveness thing and it doesn't fix it.
Yeah.
It doesn't fix what's still there. It's like
this is something.
So what? Yeah, but so what I've tried to do is subscribe to the idea that, man, life is beautiful. Even the pain is beautiful, because without the pain, the good times, you wouldn't even know they're good.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know what joy is if you didn't know what pain was.
Yeah.
And also, it's just like we are just machines. Our bodies are these problem-solving machines that learn, ow, that hurts, don't do that again. And you go through life to where you get to this point where you know what not to touch because it hurts. You know where to go because it doesn't hurt. And there's a beauty in that, passing it on to your kids or other people. And I've really tried to really look at things with a grateful just a grateful heart and try to see the beauty even in the pain. But it's still difficult because there are things or people that in my lifetime, their name comes up and there's just this, not that it physically happens, but this something inside, just like a clench of the fist. And you're like, but I have forgiven this person, but why do I still get tense when that name comes up? And I know that that's a big struggle for me, and wondering, well, God, you say to forgive, and I do, but it doesn't fix it.
Yeah.
That's a challenge for me personally, because then, like you talked about, it can manifest itself where you start to correlate a lot of chain of events and everything seems very similar, and you can kind of get lost in that.
Yeah.
And at least that.
Yeah. I've got some thoughts about that. And how old are you?
Me, I'm going to be 41 in September.
Okay, cool. I'm 49, and it got better. All that, like in the last 3 or 4 years, that clenching finally kind of stopped. A part of it for me, I mean, forgiveness is a mystery to me, and
yeah,
when it happens, I think it's a miracle, because I've tried to forgive on my own, and I can only get about halfway there or a quarter of the way there, by trying. But then I've had these moments where I've been graced with it, and it happened. Anyway, one of those was, there was somebody in my life that I had decided to forgive like 20 years ago. And no matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't get there. I couldn't. I had like the resentment still clung to my heart, And then about 3 years ago, I woke up one morning and I was like, oh man, the resentment is gone.
Wow.
I think I've forgiven this person. How did that happen? And by that point in my life, I'd gone through a brutal divorce, some tragic losses, some failures, and all those experiences. So I thought that forgiving was about trying and deciding, and I'm going to do the right thing, I'm going to forgive. And at least part of the mystery that became clear to me was that I couldn't get there by trying. It turns out that I just hadn't failed and suffered enough. And once I had enough of that in my life, then the forgiveness came a lot easier,
Yeah.
Because I can only hold resentment if I imagine I'm above somebody, right? I think, like, they did this thing wrong, and I feel what I feel about it because I wouldn't have done that, because we have a sense that one of our standards was violated. Do you think?
It's interesting that you say it that way. I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
But now that you mention it, I'm going, wow, you know what? You might be onto something. Because, there's for me, I'm definitely dealing with that, with a relatively recent situation where it's like, okay, I realize, you know what, maybe part of my resentment is in the fact that, like, okay, there's this thing that happened. I've owned it. I've owned my side of it, going, hey, this is my wrong and you're right, because I did that wrong and I did that wrong and that wrong and that wrong. And if I could go back and change it, I would. And that person is you're sort of waiting for that. Own yours now, and we're good. And they're just like, "Yep, that's right." Okay, but what about you? What about your stuff? And they don't own it, and then maybe you're right. Maybe on some level, there's I'm above you for owning it. You won't own it. There needs to be some maybe justice or something that needs to happen there, and to so maybe you're onto something. I never looked at it. Yeah, I've just never looked at it from that perspective of maybe that ultimately is sort of the problem, is seeing yourself above in a situation. But then again, there is some situations for me that, I mean, I got stuff from like when I was a kid that I didn't even realize until I became my mom's caretaker a couple years ago. She moved here to Tennessee, was dealing with cancer. And there was just maybe a thing she'd say or do when it came to my kids, and it would just like flash a memory of something that I'm just like, no, don't you dare do that to them. And it's just like, whoa. And it's like, well, I don't think I'm above you. I was a child and you treated me that way, or you said that thing. And I realized the ripple effect that's had up and even to adulthood.
Yeah.
And then when you go, hey, do you realize how wrong that is? And they're like, what's the problem? I'm just joking. It's like, wait, what? So, but that's a scenario where I don't know necessarily that applies, but there are plenty of situations where you're right. I think that there is this sense of like being above in a situation that can create that resentment. That's actually brilliant.
I'm sorry that you had those experiences.
You know what though? I'm coming to a place of being grateful for it.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. Because otherwise I look at my life, man, and I look at a lot of the things I'm able to do, and I kind of can look back and go, well, if I hadn't been told no to that thing, or been rejected from that thing, or just been treated a certain way that caused me to have a certain kind of behavior, then a lot of the things that I'm successful in my life are a result of those coping mechanisms to deal with those things. Totally. So I'm sort of a highly productive person with those issues. However, at the same time, I guess I have no choice but to try to just be grateful that there's a billion people in the world who would trade places with me and my experiences in a heartbeat. Because they'd tell a story and it would make everything I'm talking about seem like an absolute joke.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm trying to really hard to learn to just understand the perspective. One person's floor is another person's ceiling.
Yeah.
And I think part of our journey in life is going through this stuff to shape who we're supposed to be.
Yeah. A person can only hurt us if they have some kind of power over us.
Right.
If they don't have power over us, they can't hurt us, right? But if they have some kind of power over us, emotional, physical, authoritative, whatever, a person can only hurt us if they have power over us. And it is my lack of forgiveness, my way of getting power again, so that I don't get hurt again, so that now I've got the power by holding unforgiveness over a person. But I think the older I've gotten, and like the more experiences of failure, especially in loss and suffering, I think it's just kind of equalized so many things in my life. There are very few people that I have this. There are less people who have power over me at this point in my life, so that.
Is that sort of a result of allowing less people to be close enough?
I'm not sure. I think a part of it is just getting older, not caring as much. that helped.
That's freedom. There's a
Yeah.
lot of freedom in not caring.
But yeah, I think that's a piece of it. We left one thing tangling earlier that I was like, oh man, I hope I get to clarify that. The song I played, I was saying, I started out hoping to tap into people's angst with the church that they might have. But by the end of the song, I've hopefully brought them to a place of personal responsibility. It's hard to tell the truth to myself, you know? And ultimately, that's what I think we have to do.
Your song kind of touches on it loosely, where I end up, and again, it's not something I like mean to do, but I constantly get it brought to my attention that, like, hey man, you're shining the spotlight on other things right now. Like I'm asking you what's going on with you, and you're like, well, you see that thing over there? That's bothering me. That's making me feel this way, and that's problem, and that's problem. It's like, well, that's great, but what's going on with you?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm good, but that thing, and it's like, so what your song loosely talks about is like, hey, this church is doing this thing, and blah blah blah. I can't be honest in church, but then it's ultimately like I can't look inward.
Yeah.
You know, so that song really was like, wow, that's like real, man. That's and I think that's a common thing for most people.
That's exactly
really
what
have a hard time. Yeah, totally.
We're gonna turn on the spotlight. We sure like having a spotlight to point at these things, right? And then by the end, oh shoot.
Yeah. I also struggle with early on in my Christian music career. Anytime I would meet with people or talk with people, a couple people had kind of said to me, "Hey, man, you know, you talk about yourself too much," and I'm like, "I do what?" Oh no. So like, it just became this thing of like, don't talk about yourself. Don't talk about yourself. Don't talk about yourself. And I think that now it's just become this like, how can people get to know you if you don't talk about you? How can people understand your heart if you don't talk about your heart? But then again, you talked about like Jason Ingram as a songwriter he really finds ways to, you know, really just speak what's on other people's hearts. And it's like, I don't know how to do that either. Yeah. But, so, you know, let me ask you this.
Something about that all. For many, many years, for most of my career. Yeah. The criticism I got was, you talk too much in your concerts. There's way too much talking. Just play the songs. And somewhere in me, I'm thankful that I didn't believe that, but I listened. I thought, I don't think that I talk too much. It must be that I don't know how to do it well enough yet, you know? And so rather than stop talking, I just learned how to do it better, you know? And, you know, I watched how Springsteen would do it. I watched how artists like David Wilcox would do it, you know? Yeah. Storytellers. And I learned how to do it better in a way that began to resonate, you know? Yeah. So anyway, that, you know, it may not be that you were talking too much about yourself. Maybe you just still had to learn the way to do it that would build bridges between you and the people.
To be fair, yeah. I mean, there was probably a lot of me trying to, I mean, and I think you can maybe remember the early days of being a new artist, and you first meet people and you want people to be impressed with you and remember you. So you sort of, you know, boast. And I may have done a lot of more of that than now. Now I'm just like, man, it's interesting how much you learn to get better at that kind of thing over time, especially in a town like this. So, so I do want to ask you this now. There may be some people, I mean, most people who know me and maybe will tune into this podcast probably know you, or if they don't know you directly, and you know how this is in the Christian music industry, they don't know the artist, they know the song.
I didn't know he did that song.
Right. Or like, oh, that's the guy. Or, you know, very quickly they just, you probably, and I was going to ask you this earlier, but have you ever had like these concerts where people request songs that aren't yours but they think it is?
all the time, all the
Yeah.
time. Yeah, it mostly happens in the autograph line. They'll come up to me and say,
Oh, right.
oh man, this song changed my life. I can't think of nothing, and they'll name like a Brandon Heath song or a Casting Crown song.
Yeah.
I'm just like,
Yeah,
I'm glad you liked it. Bless you.
I get told all the time, people are like, I'll play a festival somewhere
Yeah.
and people just, I don't know what it is, if it's just, I don't know if it's my voice, but they're like, how come you didn't play any of the songs that we hear on the radio? I'm like, I love your new single that just came out. I'm like, who do they, and they don't ever say what song or who, but it's like, who do they think I am?
Right. Yeah.
That's weird. And why wouldn't I have played that song? That's so odd. But so again, a lot of people that know me may or may not know you. So they may be surprised to learn. I know you've talked about this a lot in your career, but you have your I mean, I guess for lack of a better word, but you have the stuttering a little bit.
Yeah. I meant to bring that up at the
Yeah.
top of our talk too, and I completely forgot. So.
Yeah.
Yes,
Now,
I do have a speech handicap.
Was there ever a time in your career, or maybe especially in the early days, where maybe somebody flat out said to you, like, you have to fix that or you can't have a career?
No, that never happened with my speech impediment. If anybody thought that, they never spoke it to me.
Yeah.
They did say it about my name. My last name used to be Gay. I don't know if you knew that or not.
I did know that. Yeah. I did.
Yeah. And I was told you'll never have a career in Christian music with the last name of Gay, just because it's confusing to consumers. They aren't going to understand. And it's just,
Sure.
And I'm like, well, God knew my name when he called me. He didn't seem to have a problem with it. Like I really resisted that for a long time. I did end up changing it, obviously, because you're having an interview with Jason Gray. But I changed it ultimately because, it was around the time when the internet was just beginning to be ubiquitous, and
Sure.
Email addresses and websites, and people weren't able to access my website or receive my emails because of porn filters and spam filters and all that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
and if you Googled my name, you'd get way more than you bargained for, and all that. It became a technological decision, But I remember very early on, as I began to be aware of God's calling on my life, I wondered how's this supposed to work? Because I got a speech handicap. And then I was like, oh, of course, I know how this is supposed to work. I have a speech handicap. You're calling me to speak for you. That means when I step out in faith and do it anyway, you're going to make it go away. And that'll be my testimony that if you step out in faith, if you trust God, he will be your healer. He will provide what you need. God's hand will not guide where he does not provide. And I thought, okay, that's perfect. Can't believe I didn't see it earlier. All right, I'm in, And that began a many years long journey of me trying to muster up enough faith to get God to do this thing,
Yeah.
And stepping up to the mic and stuttering horribly anyway. And I'm like, okay, I must not be believing hard enough, or maybe there's a sin in my life, like the person at my church tells me, or and that put me on this shame, try harder treadmill.
Wait, people told you that it didn't go away because you had sin in your life?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I was a part of a very charismatic church that had a high emphasis on healing. And so
I gotta say, I first off, I'm so sorry that you had to go through that.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's right up there with another close friend of mine who lost his wife to cancer.
Yeah.
Literally, I know those people so well. Literally, he would tell people, listen, don't call us. He'd spend 24, 48 hours together with her, and they would just nonstop pray. They'd put on worship music and they pray for 24 hours, 40. They prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed, and she didn't get healed.
Yeah.
She passed. And somebody had the audacity to say, like, it's just a shame they didn't have enough faith. And I was just like, I mean, that, you know, when someone says that about someone you love and you know their walk so well, and then I hear that story, it's just like, man, like, so I'm an Enneagram 8. So like my inner Justice League warrior is like, destroy. You
well,
know?
there's a lot of immaturity out there, isn't there? And
yeah.
Yeah.
And there's just a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of this want to be holier than thou. And it's easy when you're healthy to tell everybody else, well, you're sick because you don't do as I do.
Totally.
But but man, it just makes me sad because that someone would put you in that cage, because that's what happened, right? I mean, you end up in this prison of do more, try harder.
Yeah. And so, you know, I was in that headspace for a number of years until, you know, enough anger and frustration and resentment built up that I got angry with God. I'm like, what gives? I'm doing my best. And if my best isn't good enough, then why are we even talking? Because I'm doing everything I know to do. And it feels like you're dangling this gift of healing just out of reach, you know, and I'm stepping out in faith, and you're not meeting me there. And it's not a good look for you either. So what do you want? You know? But I couldn't stop going out and playing songs, doing my thing. I had to do that, you know? And I remember a night, I was playing at a little coffee shop in Mankato, Minnesota, and stuttered horribly that night. So it was another night of me failing God, or God failing me. At that point, it wasn't clear to me, you know, which one, or if it was either. But I remember getting done and just being humiliated and wanting to go hide, but there's no place to hide. There was just the stage and the coffee shop, you know. So I step off the stage and I turn my back to the room and I start packing up my things. And I turn around to find that a line of people has formed to talk with me. And then one after the other, I began to hear variations of the same story. Jason, thank you for doing what you did this evening, because it reminds me that I'm not defined by my weaknesses either. And then, you know, just on through the line. And then there was a guy at the end of the line who said, you know what? Thank you for what you did this evening. I believe the Lord's been calling me to do something too. And I've been arguing with him about why I think I'm not the right person for the job. And you're kind of a disaster. If you can do your thing, surely I can do my thing, you know? And I remember going home that night and realizing, oh, I think I had it wrong. Maybe it's not that you wanted to heal me of my speech handicap, but maybe you wanted to bring healing to others through it. Yeah. And that's more beautiful than the idea that I had. So if that's the plan, I'm in, you know. So,
yeah, you know, and there's also the scripture that says his power is made perfect in my weakness. So that's
very early on, I was graced with that lens. So I didn't struggle very long with the speech thing. My speech handicap is the least of my problems.
I bet. I mean, that's, you know, it's interesting. Sometimes what seems like the most glaringly obvious problem for most people just isn't. It's the one you don't see. That's
totally. Yeah.
That's the worst one.
The obvious problems are kind of easier to deal with because you can see them.
Yeah.
The sneaky hidden ones that really cause you problems.
Yeah.
Speaking of, like, we've talked a little bit about the church and what it should be, and some of that can be problematic. I've been to some great churches too, you know. So like I know.
Oh yeah.
I know that there's both are represented, but like just with anything. And I really don't think it's a church problem. I think it's a human problem. I'm more and more persuaded that the sin underneath all the other sins is self-righteousness. And maybe fear is underneath that, but self-righteousness is it's right there at the bottom underneath everything else, and feeding everything else. And my theory on it is this, that planet Earth is this hostile environment that we are thrown onto as human beings. Planet Earth is trying to kill us around every corner, right? But we've learned to survive by there's a safety in numbers, and by becoming part of a tribe that will protect you, that will keep the wolves at bay, and if you are part of a tribe, you got to subscribe to what the tribe values, and so you have to be in line with that. There's also the element of like, if I recognize that planet Earth is a hostile environment and I'm just trying to survive, being wrong about something is very dangerous. It can result in death, or it can result in being excommunicated from your tribe. And so it's very important for us to be right. And we all think that we're right. If we didn't think we were right, we'd be doing something else, right? Everything we're doing, we do because we think it's right and we're right, which makes us very vulnerable to self-righteousness, believing that we're right.
Sure. Now, I would say too that, again, there you hit the nail on the head, and we probably should have led with this versus going right into, almost the boo, church stinks. It's not that. But it's also, I don't know that we can necessarily point a finger at the church more, where I think we have to look at our world, because here's what I think, and this is a theory I have, is we in 2021 we have access to information in a fraction of a second. And so what I feel like is, the church now has the challenge, because let's even go back 10 years, 20 years. You go to church on Sunday, you have your pastor preaches a message, and usually in that message is how to apply it. Maybe you'll go home, you'll study that scripture. Maybe you'll get with your small group. You guys will study. It'll be great. But now what happens is, pastor preaches on something, but then somebody goes home and on the way home listens to a podcast about the same topic, the same scripture, a different take, maybe it's a complete opposite take of the same thing. Or someone goes, you know what, I didn't really like what the pastor said about this. And then they go maybe, listen to a Craig Groeschel sermon that says something different. And now they go, well, I believe that instead. And I feel like the discipleship is getting taken away, because people can actually go and pick and choose, pieces of songs, pieces of sermons, pieces of different things, and try to apply it to their own thing and kind of make it their own, just sort of subscribe to their own gospel. But they're doing they're taking that. Literally, I've been part of Bible studies where people are like, well, hey, man, I heard this sermon about this thing. And it's like, well, and I know for a fact, because my pastor had talked about that sermon, going, yeah, I know that so-and-so spoke about this. And he just sort of says, has a correction about it. So I think the problem is we've lost our way, because there's so many different takes on the same thing. No one knows what to follow anymore.
Well, and I think that can be a positive thing, though. The Jews. I'm trying to remember. I think the book is called The Midrash. I could be wrong about that, but anyway, there's a book, and this way of teaching scripture that will look at a verse and then interpret it like at least 12 different ways.
Sure.
And I think that's a positive thing, and has to be that, so that it doesn't become too rigid, because for God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son to save, what that meant to me and spoke to me 25 years ago, it speaks something different to me now, so there is kind of a fluidity to it in terms of that. And I'm sure you had this experience that scripture keeps speaking to you, right? Like in new ways, and you see new things, and that's because we keep changing and we keep increasing our capacity to hear different versions of it, and truth speaks differently to us as we get older and have more experiences. But I think what you were describing, though, I think that can get ugly. Again, I think self-righteousness is the culprit, that when I take all these things to kind of be my own locus point of truth, like if I'm still in the grip of my own self-righteousness, I'm going to do damage when I do that.
Sure. Well, I would say what I've personally struggled with in the vein of all of that is, and maybe you've gone through this too, or witnessed it in others, is I definitely see it happening in others, and then had to really look at myself and go, wait, maybe I've done that. And then I realize I have. Yeah. And it's the fact of going, like you talked about, letting the scripture speak to you, right? Well, then there's also times where you hear how that's a scripture spoke to somebody that you respect or like or want to like you within your church. So you're like, well, good enough for them, good enough for me. Hey man, that scripture spoke to me and I believe it the same way you do. And it made me realize that, like, man, there are some things that I have, some Christian beliefs that I realize that I have chosen because people I respect and like and want to like me have already subscribed to that. So me too.
Totally.
And I think that, it's like, wow, if I'm guilty of that, maybe a lot of people are guilty at. Then it turned me cynical, going, do we even believe any of this?
Right. Yeah.
So I think that that's the struggle. I sometimes wake up in a sweat going like, do I really believe this, or am I just joining in on a rhetoric? And I want to have faith, and I know I believe, but do I? I don't know. And it's this crazy hamster wheel of like, I don't know anymore. What's real?
No, man. Well, and I think that's growth. I think, I think hopefully we grow into that
sure
space.
You think that's a good place to end up in?
Yeah. I was going to share something. I'll paraphrase it. There's a book called The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck. He compares our spiritual growth, the stages of spiritual growth, as being analogous to the phases of emotional growth. So like when you're born as a baby, everyone has to do everything for you, and you're kind of an outlaw and demanding. And I can't remember that correlation, but the next phase that a child grows into is the phase of rules and order and structure. No, you cannot do this. No, you cannot do that. Yes, you can do this. And they, they just have to do what they're told, and they're content with doing that. Well, that's what kind of happens with us, like we are born again eventually, or have some kind of spiritual awakening. We get plugged into a church and we can kind of become rigid, and
right.
Then in emotional maturity, you hit your teens and you start to look around and you're like, why am I obeying these clowns? They don't, they're not any smarter than me. And then we decide to do our own thing. We go through a phase of rebellion, and then we make stupid decisions and we get really hurt and we get washed up on the shore of the other side of that into adulthood. And we're like, now I understand what all those rules were about. They're meant to protect me. And now I can integrate it into my life because now I understand and I'm choosing to. And then you become a mature human being, right? And that's what can happen in our spiritual walk too. So like his point is that sometimes if you're in a rigid belief system and you lose your faith, that's not regression. That might be growth. Maybe you have to lose your faith or some version of it where you question it all, and it all falls apart. And you have to go through that in order to get into the next phase of maturity, and integrate.
So, and I think that it's become sort of the popular word, but I mean, I know that like Kevin Max recently, he came under some fire by admitting that he's kind of deconstructed his faith. But he even said to kind of find my way back to it. And I feel like a lot of people I know are going through that exact same thing. I have a friend who has said to me recently, he goes, man, as of this moment, I'm no longer a Christian. I'm stepping out of what I've been taught so that I can, with a clean slate, dive into, okay, I want to find the real Jesus.
Yes.
And he admits if he's even there. Now, I truly believe he will find him and he will find where he's supposed to be. But I feel like kind of breaking down your faith. Why do I believe what I believe? Why? And again, is it because the scriptures have spoken to me, because God has put these words in front of me that have allowed the Holy Spirit to mold and shape me? Or am I subscribing to this because, again, like I said earlier, someone I respect, care about, or want to like me? So I think a lot of people are going through that, or it's just, hey, it's what I was told to believe and I did. And I often look at too, I think part of our problem, and I, we're going to wrap up very soon. I know you probably got to get some rest. You had a couple concerts to go, but I feel like one of the biggest problems, and I think this might be unique to America, is, and again, this may sound conspiracy theorist, but I think one of the reasons why we're struggling as a country, as Americans who are in church and believe in God and Jesus, I think one of the reasons we struggle is because from the time we're a child, now you may not have been grown up this way. I did. Most people I know did. But from the time you're a child, there's, you're told about Santa Claus, better behave, or you're not going to get presents on Christmas, or you're told about a tooth fairy or an Easter bunny.
A benevolent judge, isn't he?
So, yeah, but at the end of the day, you're taught about these things that you can't ever see that will do something for you if you behave a certain way, you do a certain thing, and then you get old enough and it's like, oh, I'm sorry, but that's not real. Oh, it's not? No. Then you go to this. Then, oh, sorry, that's not real either. And then by the time now you're an adult and this Jesus guy and this God, it sure sounds a lot like all these other things. Yeah. Behave or you'll get something for it. Or just this unseen thing that is magical and powerful and special that I don't ever get to see. This sounds a lot like that. What's to say that that's not the next big thing that someone's going to go, oh, yeah, sorry about that. So I think that, that's where I actually regret doing all those things with my children, the Easter bunny and all that stuff, because, you do it as a social norm. But now I realize I'm asking them to put their faith in something and then ripping it from them eventually.
Right.
How horrible.
Yeah.
So
big jerk.
Well, that's how it feels, and it's like, because now I'm going to ask them as teens and adults, where the common thing has been believe in this, and then eventually it's just you're going to find out it's not real. And then now here's this thing that, let's face it, Christianity, being a follower of Christ, believing in God is hard, especially with a lot of the things we see around us all the time. I mean, I listen, I'm not afraid to admit this, but when COVID hit and all these shows got canceled and like so much just awful stuff was going on, I texted a couple of friends of mine who like they've spoken so much into my life, and I'm like, dude, either God left the building or he's not real, man. What's happened? How did this happen? And they all sort of just they talked me off the ledge, and they're like, dude, I get it, but and they kind of talked me off that. But it's like, man, maybe we're kind of now reaping what we've sown between how we've been raised with things to believe in, and then eventually it's just not what we said it was. And then now we have this access to information where there's 50 ways to believe in the same thing on your phone in 1 second. I mean, I could be in a songwrite and go, hey, what does Philippians 4:13 mean? And I could find 5 different explanations and contexts to use it in. Yeah. And I feel like that's dangerous, because what do you believe anymore? Because so much of your life you've been taught to put your faith in something, and then it goes away. And now it's like, hey, put your faith in this, and here's all these different ways to look at it. It's hard, man.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Like, does any of that reveal our desire for order?
Well, to me, what it reveals is what you talked about earlier, though, is looking at ourselves and focusing on our time in the Word, not trying to glean from someone else's time in the Word, like a lot of us do, like listening to podcasts or sermons. Yeah. It's for us to dive in on our own faith and our own walk with the Lord more than ever, rather than, again, getting sucked in. And because then what happens is we don't do that, and then we blame the church.
Yeah.
So I think that sort of circles back to that. Whereas ultimately, I think, we have all these things going on that make it difficult. But, again, to circle back to everything you talked about earlier, is that, man, it's a people problem. It's ultimately an us problem.
Yeah.
It starts with us, and that's the struggle, man.
Am I going to Scripture for it to tell me the right thing to believe? Or am I going to Scripture continually for it, asking it to reveal the log in my own eye? Show me where I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I think that's I think that's what Scripture is for, and I think everything in us wants to use it as tell me how to live, tell me the right thing to agree with, give me defense against the chaos. I want to be right. I'm going to use this book to be right.
Wow. I've never heard it put that way, but that is gold. That is, wow. You know what? That is probably the right way to look at it. Because I look at my own life, like, and maybe you can agree with this. So I struggle, like when I'm part of a worship team, I hate when service is over and people walk up, hey man, sounding good. I hate that. I want the worship leader to be like, yo man, your timing was a little off right there. Hey, you're a little pitchy on the bridge. Be careful. I want that. Tell me what I've done wrong.
Yeah.
So, but yet, when I'm in the Word, I'm not looking for what's wrong. I'm looking for, where am I doing a good job, God? Wow.
Like I was thinking recently, just unbeknownst to myself, for all my life, I've been reading like the Gospels, identifying with heroes or people I wanted to be in the Gospel, and have just begun to learn the value of, like, what if I read Scriptures and I actively try to identify with the villain? What might I discover about myself? Because if I read the Gospels and I don't see that one of the things the Gospels is saying, that the Pharisees, those who were most interested and invested in the coming of the Messiah, and
Yeah.
expectant, cared about it, that they were the ones who missed him. And if I don't see myself in that like, oh, that's not just a possibility, that's actually likely, that's probably going to happen, I'm going to miss God because I won't recognize the way that, because he's not showing up in the way that I thought he would. Yeah, it's
And it's tough, like I'll look through scripture and realize, man, I'm Martha today. Or like, I've been Job for the last few months, man. Like, I'm not one of the heroes right now. I'm one of the I'm one of the crybabies right now,
Yeah.
But man, this has just been an awesome conversation, and I mean, I could go forever, but I know you got things to do and stuff. But so what's next for Jason Gray? What's coming up soon? What can we look forward to with you?
Just out doing shows. I'm really blessed to get to host a show on XM radio called Acoustic Storytime. Love doing that. But the main thing I'm working on these days is I'm trying to write a book. So,
okay,
would like to get that done sooner than later, but it's difficult.
Yeah, is that something that you're doing on your own, like hitting a pen to pad or finger to keyboard, or do you have like a writer you're working with to organize it all?
I'm doing it on my own, and then after I have like 10 or 11 chapters, I'm going to send it off to a publisher and then an editor, and see where it goes from there. But I need to give them something to kind of look at first, and
right,
what any problems might be, or that kind of thing. So,
well, if hearing your music, hearing you speak, I've attended I attended one of your acoustic storytime.
Mark Martell.
Yes, Mark Martell. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow. But I was there. What a night. What a night. That was such a good night. And so yeah, like what you do with that is just is phenomenal. And I wish more artists did that. And looking forward to the book. Looking forward to more music from you. And thank you so much for being on the podcast. I hope that people understand, our hearts in, a lot of what we're talking about is just, and it's just real talk. I just want to summarize this whole thing of, look, I don't think either of us are trying to say this is what we know to be true. You should all subscribe to these ideas. This is just honest talk about what we're seeing, working it out. And that's what I want this podcast to really be, is that to see whether it's well-known artists or people you've never heard of, who, do have faith. We all come at it from different angles. We all deal with stuff. Okay. And I just, and I hope that the viewers who watch the video or the listeners of the podcast can glean something from this. And, love to, if anyone wants to yell at me about any of the things that I've said, you're welcome to reach out. Leave poor Jason alone.
Well, I'd say I reserve the right to be wrong about all of it, and
1,000%,
because I've been wrong about so many things, So I've got good practice at being wrong.
Yeah.
Hey, can I close this with a 1-minute song?
You know what? Make it as long a song as you want it to be. But yeah, rock and roll.
1 minute. Just some of the things we talked about. I thought, oh man, I might see if it's okay if I end it with this song.
Yeah, totally.
What the Hard Times Taught Me. I was made in the hard times. That pain is a gold mine. It'll make a poor fool wise. Yeah, it got real in the hard times. It hurt bad, but I don't mind. That hurt'll make a heart kind. I believe that I'm where you want me. I can see from the place you brought me There's a life in the light of what the hard times taught me. Though it didn't go the way I planned it, I learned how to live open-handed in a brand new day with what the hard times taught me. Woohoo!
This podcast is brought to you in part by Tone Junkie TV, your best source for Kemper, Helix, and impulse response profiles. Check them out on YouTube, all social media at Tone Junkie TV. Also check them on the web store at tonejunkiestore.com. Use promo code Golly to get 50% off site-wide. That's right, 50% off site-wide, tonejunkiestore.com.